Hi there. This is Twila from the Facebook group Soapmaking with Natural Ingredients Forum, and today we're going to do just a very basic cold process recipe. And I guess we're going to call this a beginner's recipe because it's going to have absolutely no additives, no coloring, no scent. This is as basic as it gets to get you started if you're worried about getting started. And in this, I want to point out a few things to you, a couple myths that you'll hear along the soap making journeys. And I also want to point out some things that concerned me when I first started. I had done a lot of reading and I heard things about trace and what trace should look like. So tonight, as I do this, I'm hoping that we'll be able to actually show you some different stages of trace, and so that you'll be able to identify it when you see it. Anyway, you're going to have to bear with me while I switch my camera around. I'm here by myself. I don't have a partner. If that's good or not. Not bad, I guess. There. So this recipe today is going to have 5 basic oils in it. And there's going to be lard, coconut oil, shea butter, castor oil, and just some olive oil. And those are some pretty basic oils that you can find about anywhere. Coconut oil you can get at your grocery store. Lard you can get at your grocery store. I don't have a tendency to use that because it usually has additives. I either order mine from a soaping supply place, or I actually have a lady who I visit once in a while that I'm able to obtain some of her lard. So that's always a good option. Your shea butter, when I first started, instead of ordering at soaping supply places, I actually went to my local health food store and I was able to find shea butter there. So it was now granted, it's more expensive. Castor oil, I was able to find that when I started just in the drugstore. And of course, olive oil is in your grocery store. Just be careful though, because there is a huge amount of olive oil on the market today that can possibly be adulterated. And do some reading to see if you can find some brands in your area that is noted not to be. Anyway, we're going to get started. So I typically do not heat my liquid oils. I just warm up and melt my hard oils. So I'm going to dump these all in a bowl here. And as you're doing this, try to get all of your, you've measured everything very carefully with your scales, and that's another good point. I'm sure if you've done any reading, you know that you should never work with recipes that, if you find a recipe online that's talking about cups or half cups or anything like that, stay away from that and go with something that you can run through a lye calculator yourself. And it should be done by weights, either grams or ounces, whichever you prefer. And make sure that you have scales. That's one piece of equipment that when you're soaping, you cannot skimp on. You must have a set of scales. This is my set that I currently use. Whoops, I hit the camera. This is my set that I currently use. You don't need anything that fancy. You can pick up a little set of kitchen scales, and until you are soaping with larger quantities of oils, a little set of kitchen scales will be all that you need. Now, I'm just going to pause this while I actually go melt these oils, and I will be back. Okay, I'm back. So I have my melted oils. So now to my hot oils, which if I check the temperature on these are about 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's one reason why I like to add my liquid oils and not heat them, is it helps to bring the temperature of the oils down to the area where you're going to soap, or the temperature where you're going to soap. So just scrape all of your dishes out good, because like I said, you've measured your oils, and you want to make sure that you're getting enough oils to saponify the lye, to use with the lye that we're using. You don't want to shortchange yourself on the oils. Now this is the castor oil. So clean those dishes out really well. we go. You know, you do have a little bit of leeway because most people have a superfat in their soap. And we do have a superfat today of 7%. And at the end of this, I am going to post the recipe. Not that it's a fancy recipe, it's very plain, but it's a very good basic recipe. Now, I want to talk a little bit about mixing your lye. And I wanted to do this on camera so that you could actually see this. And I want to point out some safety factors. You always wear your gloves when you're mixing your lye. I prefer long sleeves. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I get slack and I don't have long sleeves on. However, there has been a time or two I've regretted that and I've had minor splatters on my arms. I always wear enclosed shoes. And I always wear my goggles when I'm working with lye. And those are just a basic set. You can get full face shields if you feel more comfortable with those. And those will also protect your prescription glasses. I actually splattered lye on my prescription glasses one time when I thought that glasses was enough protection that I didn't need goggles as well. And the lye actually ate away the anti-scratch coating and left funny looking marks on my lenses, and I had to replace my glasses. So I've learned the hard way, which is usually the way I learn everything. And this is, you do not have to wear this, but this is just a little respirator or mask. I get these at the dollar store. They're very cheap. Typically, I do my lye outside. I find that you get a lot more air that way, and the fumes, while the lye is reacting with the water, will be a lot less intense if you do it outside. If you have to do it inside, I recommend a respirator. And there are also way fancier gizmos than this that you can use. The big ones that seal your face off totally with the two filters on each side. So those are also an option, but I usually just use one of these. Now today, if I'm inside. Now today, I'm going to do this inside, like I said, to show you. This is just distilled water, so it's just plain water. You should always use distilled water in your recipes. If you use regular tap water, there is a chance that your tap water is beautiful and you will never have issues using it in your soap. There can be mineral deposits and impurities in your well water that eventually may contribute to what's called DOS in your soap, or dreaded orange spots, which doesn't really affect the fact that you can't use the soap if that develops, but it doesn't look very nice. They're kind of ugly orangey browny spots, and eventually it will cover the entire bar of soap. So if you stick with filtered water, that is one thing that will help to reduce the likelihood of that happening. So here is my lye crystals. And as we add this, I'm going to show you, you may even see the fumes or the heat come up from the container. I hope it can capture that for you. But one thing that's going to happen with the lye, I typically do not pour all of my lye in at once. I know some people do. But there are times when you don't want to pour all your lye in at once. Like if you're working with goat's milk or something like that, you may want to just sprinkle a bit at a time and not let the lye reaction become so hot. So for me, it's just a habit that I sort of do it at least in thirds and sometimes less than that. So you're going to hear my noisy spoon stirring here, but I want to show you that when you dump your lye in, your water is going to turn a milky white color, and I think you can see that there, that you can't see the bottom of the pitcher anymore. And that's very normal. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong. Everything is fine, and that will clear once the reaction is complete. So I just keep dumping in third at a time here and stirring. And one good thing to point out is that you'll notice I'm using a stainless steel pitcher. You can also use plastic pitchers, a sturdy plastic pitcher, but you should do some research. And I can't remember, I think it has to be a number 5 if I'm not mistaken to be safe for lye. You want something that can withstand a high temperature, because I think you can see the steam coming off of the pot, or maybe you can't. Anyway, there is steam coming off the pot, and when I put my hand on the bottom of this, that's extremely hot. Like, I can't keep my hand on that. And actually, if I check the temperature here now, that's up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit there right now. So glass is not a good option. Glass can shatter and break when you may use it fine 10 trips in a row. and think, oh, there's nothing wrong with using glass, but then the 11th trip it could shatter. So I don't ever use glass, and I very seldom use plastic. I generally use my stainless steel pitchers. But if this is your first batch and you don't want to invest in stainless steel, then by all means get some plastic pitchers to use. So this is starting to clear a little bit. It's not quite as milky as it was, although it still shows milky to you. And what we're going to do now is we're going to try to lower the temperature of the lye enough that we can combine it with the oils. I prefer to soap somewhere 100 or slightly less. The hotter temperatures you soap at, the more likelihood of volcanoes in your soap when you put it in the mold. The quicker your soap will probably trace and thicken up on you. So if you're looking to possibly have a little bit of time and not have to hurry if you want to do swirls eventually or that type of thing, you're better off soaping at a cooler temperature. Now you can soap at room temperature, but those type of temperatures, when you get too low, you'll have to watch that as well, because then you can get into false trace, and that isn't something as a beginner that you might not be able to recognize that. So it would be a good idea at first if you soap somewhere probably between 90 and 100 degrees would be fine. Now, as you can see the bottom of the pitcher there now. So that lye reaction, the cloudiness has cleared up. So I'm going to set this in I've got some cold water here in my sink, and I'm just going to set that in there because I want to lower the temperature. And sometimes I have to even set my oils in the sink as well. But these are cooling down quite nicely. This is down to 120, so probably by the time the lye is ready, we'll be good to go here with these. I want to point out while we're waiting for that this is a laser, infrared thermometer. I always want to call it a laser thermometer. It's an infrared thermometer, and it's great, but you don't have to have that when you start. When I started, I just had this dinky little thermometer from the dollar store. And it was a bit of a pain because you had to dip it in your pot and then you had to wipe it off and then dip it in your lye and wipe it off. But it still worked fine, and it was, like I said, from the dollar store. So you don't need to invest in really expensive gadgets at first. And if you keep your eye out for these, you will get a good deal on these eventually when they're on sale. Now, one other myth I wanted to put to rest here while we're waiting for the lye to cool down is the fact that you will hear a lot of people say that you need to have vinegar on hand if you get splashed with lye. And that was a common thought or a common practice many years ago, or even recently. There's still people doing it, but they have now shown that water is the best thing that you can flush a lye burn with. So if you get splattered with lye, somewhere on your body, clean the area and flush it with lots of water. Vinegar is fine to use if you were to spill your soap here on the counter or on the floor. You can certainly use vinegar to clean that up. Vinegar will eventually neutralize the lye, but in the process of doing that, it will make temporarily a hotter reaction. So if you were to put the vinegar on your body, it would neutralize it. But in the meantime, it may burn you further first before it neutralizes it. So try to keep that in mind. If you want vinegar on hand to wipe up spills on your counter or your floor, great. But for your person, make sure that you're using just water is all you need. Now, today we're going to put our soap in individual molds because I want to take it to a couple stages, and hopefully this won't trace too fast on me. I don't think it will. But I'd like to show you the difference today between some different stages. One is emulsification, and then a thinner trace and a thicker trace. And I'd like to pour the batter at different stages and just show you the difference so that you can maybe see it better and get a better idea. This is a strainer, and when we get ready to add our lye to our oils, I always strain my lye. Generally, there's never any lumps of lye left, but I'm not going to chance it. If a gob of lye didn't dissolve and gets in your soap, then that could potentially burn someone. So I always strain my lye. Now I'm just going to shut this off again for a quick minute and check on the temperatures here, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So I have the lye and the oils are to about, the lye's at 93 and the oils are at 98. So that's definitely close enough. It doesn't have to be exact at all. So we're going to combine the two. So I'm probably covering up your view here. Maybe I should do this way. Here we go. So I'm just going to pour that in. And then just clean your pitcher out. I actually really like these rubber spatulas, or silicone, I guess they are, not rubber. They used to be rubber. Silicone spatulas. They make cleaning things out so much easier. Give this a tap. And like I said, I don't see anything in there that was undissolved, but it's just a safety measure that I prefer to take. Now, I want you to look in here. This is what oil and water or oil and lye looks like when it hasn't mixed. You can see the thicker oil sitting at the bottom and the watery substance on the top. And that is because it hasn't emulsified. So we're going to give this a little bit of a stir, and then I'm going to blitz it with the stick blender a little bit. And I want you to notice that my stick blender, I want to point this out to you as well, is an old yard sale find or flea market find. See, it's cracked. I paid like $1.50 for this thing. So you don't need to have a lot of expensive equipment when you first start out. So we're going to give this a blitz, and I'm going to ask you to forgive the noise, because although it's old and it works well, it's loud. And then I'm just going to show you when we get it to what's called emulsification, which isn't trace. Okay, so here we go. I always keep a container handy to set my my stick blender in, and it catches the drips. You don't have quite as much mess that way if you do that. Now, one good way, emulsification is very watery. It isn't thick at all. And one good way, that was probably the trickiest thing for me to identify when I first started soaping. And there's still times it fools me. I won't lie. I'm not a professional soaper by any means. But one way to tell if your soap has reached emulsification is if you sort of walk away for a few minutes and just let it set. If you come back and you can see that separation has started to occur, and that there's a layer, you know, that you can tell that there's a separate layer sitting on the top, and that the rest is separating down, you know, settling to the bottom of the bowl, then you're not to emulsification. And you do not have to take a soap to trace to work with it to do swirls, to work with it to do anything fancy. If you want to color different portions, to do fancy pours and whatnot techniques. And you don't even need to take it to trace. If all you're going to do is pour this plain soap in your mold, as long as it reaches emulsification, you're good to go. So this is just to ensure. I'm just going to give it one more quick blitz. There. And the other thing I want to point out is I typically try to match the size of my container to the amount of soap I'm doing. Now today we're working with a pound of oils, but I picked purposely a more bigger, round, shallower dish to work with than I typically would, because I wanted you guys to be able to see into it. But the less liquid or the less soap batter you have, when you introduce your stick blender, there's going to be more risk of air sucking as it down into your batter as it stirs. So we may have a few more air bubbles today than we typically would if I had gone with something a bit smaller around and deeper. And we'll definitely get a few bubbles after I pour some of this off into the molds, and I'm left with less to bring to a thicker trace, because that is my goal today. So this is emulsified, and I'm going to pour at least one of these off to have to compare. So there. So that's our first soap, and that was put in the mold at emulsification, not at trace. Now, I am going to continue to blend this. So while I'm doing this, because it's going to be a little noisier, I'm going to shut the camera off. But I'll be back once it's a little thicker. Okay, I'm back. Now, this is at a trace stage here, and it's not a terrible thick trace, but just so to give you an idea, trace, if you take your batter and if you drizzle it across the top, you will be able to see a little bit of that design left in the top of your soap. Now, I'm sure that with my poor lighting here today, you're not going to be able to see that. But if you can drizzle some soap batter around and see the little swirly marks that you made when you did it, you have reached trace. And another thing I sometimes do is just take my stick blender, stick that circle in, and I can perfectly see that little circular indent that just sort of sits there on top of the soap for a little bit. So we are now at a light trace. So now I'm going to pour a little bit off of that. Whoops, I'm making an awful mess here moving that mold around. So this is light trace. And I'm just going to continue to keep moving with this and get it thicker and thicker so that you can see the differences. And because we can get this to the point that it'll be thick enough that you can basically spoon it into your mold. So I'm going to shut you off again here. Okay, so now we're at what I would call a medium trace. It's starting to get thicker. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's more like the consistency of a pudding. It's kind of a bit gloopier, and I guess that's probably not an official term, but anyway, that's my term, gloopier. So I'm going to pour, and I'm not going to lift that again because every time I do, I'm spilling it. So I'm going to pour this one. So this is more of a medium trace. And now I do want to take it, and I'm going to take the rest right to quite a thick trace just to show you the difference. But before I shut the camera off and do that, one other thing I want to point out to you is that you don't have to stick blend the whole time, especially if you're working with a recipe that has a lot of soft oils and is going to be slow to trace like olive oil or whatnot. You can stick blend for a few seconds, and then I might go start washing my dishes and come back in 5 minutes and give it another little blitz and turn around and go do something else for a while. Soap will eventually come to trace on its own without you even doing anything. So don't burn out your stick blender by thinking you've got to blend it the whole time. And it doesn't hurt to turn your back on, you know, when that's really watery, to turn your back and do a few dishes. You know, just keep your eye on it. And it saves your stick blender and saves you from standing in one spot trying to get this to hurry along. So I'm going to shut you off one more time and get this to a really thick trace. Okay, there, I'm back. So now, this has got to quite a thick trace here now, and I just want to show you that you can like sort of push this to the side, and it's thick enough that it's not running back and filling the bowl again. This is the stage where if you wanted to make a design in the top of your soap on your loaf, it would probably hold up to that at this point. So now I'm going to bring this back because I do want to show you in the mold here. Of course, this isn't going to pour quite as nice because it's thicker, but you should be able to see here. Can you see how that's keeping, how it's piled up and it's keeping the shape on the top? So that's a thicker trace. And these soaps, probably with just my camera, it's not going to show you a real good idea. But this one was the emulsification one that's still very thin and watery. So if you had wanted to do designs, I don't know if you can tell, but that one I could still pour that out of the edge of the mold. See how it's starting to pour out the edge there? It's still that watery. So if you wanted to do have a lot of time to mix different colors and do fancy swirls and pouring techniques, that would be the stage that's going to buy you more time, as you can see, because all this time we could still be working with that. This was a thin trace, and it's starting to set up a little now. This was sort of a medium trace, and this one here that's all piled up is your thicker trace. So I'm going to take pictures of these at the end of the video and add it to the video when they come out of the mold so that you can see the difference and be able to identify, but also see that although this is still very watery, the first one, the emulsification one, that's going to make soap. It just needs time to harden up. And it will take a little bit longer to get out of the mold than these other ones will. So basically, that's all I wanted to show you today, was the different stages of trace and sort of let you know that you didn't have to, see if I can do this without making you sick to your stomach when I move the video. There. I just wanted you to know that you don't have to stand there and stick blend, stick blend. It will eventually come to trace on its own, you know, with just the odd occasional little blurb with your stick blender. And I really wanted to emphasize the fact about the vinegar and the water thing today, because when I first started soaping, I had read all this about the vinegar and I was convinced that that's what I had to have, my jug of vinegar sitting right there. And now, as long as you have your water source or a good jug of water there to flush, you're fine. But the other thing I wanted to mention to you is don't get slap happy with your safety gear. It's very easy to happen. Probably 90% of us have done that and we've regretted it with one type of a burn or another. So just be diligent with that. And above all, have fun with soaping. Don't be intimidated by it. You're going to make mistakes, and it doesn't matter if you soap for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you're still going to make mistakes, and you're still going to have flops and batches that didn't turn out the way you wanted to. But it's certainly a great hobby or a great business to get into eventually. But for now, just enjoy it and enjoy all the different things that you learn. So I'm very glad that I could bring this to you today, and give me some feedback. If you have any questions, be sure and post them below and I'll get back to you. Anyway, happy soaping. Bye for now. Good morning. So this is the following day and I have unmolded these, and just to point out that these weren't done to be fancy soaps at all. These were done to show you something. So this one is the one that was poured at emulsification. So as you can see, it has turned into a normal soap, the same as the rest of these. So, but you can see that the top is very flat. This one was poured at very light trace, very, very similar to the one that was poured at emulsification. Very little difference. This one was poured more at a medium trace, and can you see how the top, you know, has a little bit of the design showing there, like where it didn't smooth out, and that's because the batter was thicker. This is the one that we took to thick trace. Remember how it was piled up and it didn't flatten out at all. So that's just to show you that you can get to the different stages, and how this would be much harder to work with if you were trying to do swirls or any fancy techniques. The other thing to keep in mind when you go to thick trace is it's very hard to get it in your mold so that it lays nice. Can you see here on the side how there's like air bubbles on both sides? So the thicker it is, you may have a more rustic looking loaf if you have the thick, but there's still nothing wrong with the soap. So anyway, I hope this gave you a little bit of indication of what trace was and what emulsification is, and how it all gives you soap, but different stages would be easier to work with depending on what you're trying to do. So that's basically all I wanted to show you today. So thanks for letting me share this with you, and we'll see you next time.